Hi, my name is George Brenneman, and I'm with Keith.
Hello, everybody.
We're with RestoreWellness.org. We're a group that's trying to get the word out on how to get healthy, how to stay healthy, and avoid the doctors. And our guest today is Dr. Robert Lufkin, who, thank you so much for coming, first of all. The book you got in the background there, Lies I Taught in Medical School. I've told the story multiple times on the podcast. That's the one that kicked it off for me. It just really hit home with a lot of the stuff in there. And our whole goal here today is to get people enough information that they feel like they got to go out and get it and read it, because it'll change your life. And so thank you so much for doing that.
Oh, that's very kind. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. I can't wait to dive into what we're going to do.
So let's start at the beginning. I said it kind of changed the way I was looking at things, and that's sort of how you came to write it. You found yourself with all of these conditions that you were told you would never get if you did the right thing. Can you tell the story a little bit about how you got started down this path of, looking at metabolic things instead of the food pyramid?
Yeah. My background is I'm a physician. I'm an MD. I've spent basically my entire career at two large medical schools here in Southern California. And I was, for the longest time, like many people, I was minding my own business. I was teaching. I was, I got to learn as much often from the students I was teaching as that as much as I taught them. I also got to do research. Our lab wrote hundreds of papers. We had millions of dollars in grants from NIH and the pharmaceutical companies and device makers, which I will be critical of in this presentation. And I also got to practice medicine. So I got to see patients and that kind of thing. And you're probably thinking, wait a minute, you're part of the problem. That's why we're here. And that's true. Because coming from the sort of the temples of Western medicine, such as the medical schools are, that is a lot of the problem, as we talk about in the book. And I'm very, very critical of Western medicine. By Western medicine, I don't mean like East or West, but I mean like modern allopathic medicine. And it's all over the world. It's not just in one place, but It's sort of the conventional medicine.
You got a symptom, take a pill.
Yeah. I mean, when I grew up in the 20th century, like those of us who remember that time, Western medicine truly transformed the world. It was magical in the things that it did, largely through public health and infectious disease and those kinds of things. And the pills, the surgeries that were invented were really made the world truly a better place. And hey, don't get me wrong. Even today, if I get hit by a car out on the street, I'm going to want a blood transfusion. I'm going to want my ruptured spleen removed. I'm going to want my bones set. Western medicine definitely has a place to play. But the problem is, and this is what the book is about, when we're in the 21st century, we're facing literally a tsunami of what are called chronic diseases. They were present in the 20th century, but in the 21st century, they've magnified now into literally biblical numbers, where they take up to 80% of our healthcare resources. And by that, I'm talking about obesity, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, cancer, heart disease, even mental illness. And the problem is, when Western medicine applies the pills and surgery that always used to work to these chronic diseases, they may be life-saving in the short term, but it doesn't get to what we call the root cause. And in most cases, they don't work. And that's really the problem. And I haven't answered your question yet.
But not only are the chronic diseases more prevalent now, they're affecting younger and younger people. It used to be, if you had a heart attack, you were 90 years old. Now, post-COVID shot, we've got 17-year-old athletes getting heart attacks and stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, the numbers in adults are increasing. And sadly, just a few weeks ago, the Journal of the American Medical Association just reported that 1/3 of children in America are now pre-diabetic. And, pre-diabetes is diabetes, and most Americans, most of us adults in America are overweight or obese. Most adults have high blood pressure or are being treated for it, and it goes on and on and on and on like that. But anyway, long story short, what forced me to visit this really was like so many people in the space, I came down with four of those diseases suddenly,
Wow.
and I went to my doctor like any good patient, and they prescribed four medicines, for pills, and I said, what about lifestyle? And they gave me a couple things, and I said, was that going to work? And they go, no, not really. You're going to be on these pills for the rest of your life, so get used to it. And I had two young daughters at the time. They're still fairly young, and I realized that wasn't going to end well. So it forced me to really take a deep dive and consider that. And that's what the book's about, my journey. And I was able, no spoilers, but I was able with a few lifestyle changes to really transform my life to the point that I didn't need to take the pills anymore. The diseases were reversed. And now I've literally made it my mission in life to help others take back their health and wellness, and hopefully not make the same mistakes that I made.
Well, that we all made. I mean, we were told to, basically. I remember in the 60s when the food pyramid came out, and my mom was like, oh, we got to all start drinking, 2% milk was a brand new thing. And it's almost like every recommendation we got was wrong. And in the early part of your book, after you talk about, how you had to kind of come to grips that you were now one of the statistics, you eventually get to the topic of metabolic health. And that seems to be, I was going to say all the rage right now, but I think a lot of people are finally waking up to the problem is our diet. The problem is when we eat, how we eat, what we eat. And the pharmacy industry and the farm industry, quite frankly, are sort of just feeding into the problem instead of finding the solutions. So what is the single biggest takeaway from your initial studies that was either a surprise to you or was reinforced?
Well, yeah, I had several kind of wake up calls when I came down with these four diseases. I mean, one of them was that I thought the pills and surgery would work, but as I dove deeper in, they don't address the root cause. And the second thing, maybe even more important, was I was told I had four diseases. That's what I thought, four separate diseases. But actually, I just had one, and it was metabolic disease. That there's very strong evidence that this is at the root cause of, most of these chronic diseases I mentioned. It plays a large, if not the most important role in all of them. And that was, that was really transforming to me. And the last thing that I never thought of it that way before, but I realized that doctors, that these diseases, they don't come on overnight. It's not like an on and off switch. In other words, these chronic diseases start literally years to decades before most people figure out they have them. And that's because they wait until the doctor diagnoses them. The problem is, if we wait, decades with these smoldering diseases under the hood that we don't realize, we wait till the doctor diagnoses them, it's always worse the longer you wait. And so we miss a tremendous opportunity for prevention or reversing it. And how do we do it? It's with the same, and the good news is it's all about metabolism and the same lifestyle tips, strategies that we employ work for obesity, diabetes, everything on the list. So
I have a strong, really good theory that if you get someone in the health space where they're taking care of themselves, and all the other diseases begin to disappear. And I understand, your background is radiology, and a lot of medical people know what radiologists do, but the outlier people, I'm not quite for sure. And in your situation, you sat in a dark room for long periods of time, and that wasn't necessarily. We all sit in society today, and I think that's what's wrong with part of our metabolism metabolism is that we're sitting, so our metabolism isn't getting charged up. And if you start looking back at things and you say, well, let's reverse that piece, let's reverse the sedentary parts of our life, and let's charge that metabolism, and then the metabolic diseases begin to fix themselves.
Well, and one of the things you mentioned was, when you went to your doctor, it was 4 separate diseases, treated with 4 separate pills. But what we now know, and many more people are coming to understand, it's one root cause. You're eating the wrong stuff. Keith, you always used to think if you put bad fuel in a race car, it's not going to drive.
Right, exactly. Or if your oxygen is not coming in, aka exercise, it's going to putter out too. I think that your time.
If I can just jump in one thing too,
Sure.
I agree with both you guys. What you're saying, it's diet is for most of us probably fundamental, and stress and Keith, like you're saying, and exercise and just moving is the other one. Mm-hmm. But I think there are 2 other things that I wasn't aware of, but if we miss them, even if we fix our diet and we fix our exercise, if we don't fix these other 2 things, we'll still go off the rails. And that was, one thing you talked about, moving around as a radiologist, sitting in a dark room, that's very unhealthy. Yeah. The other thing I did for my career is I carried around a pager, and I was on call frequently 24/7. So I get called in the middle of the night all the time. I was up and down, and I thought that made me tough, and that I was helping my patients and I was sacrificing for them. And what I didn't realize is that I was actually I was being stupid personally, and not everyone on call is stupid, but I was, and I realized I was potentially harming my patients because I was not at my best, and we all, different professions have to do shift work and occasionally, but right. If you do it, there are ways you can do it where you maximize your recovery time and you take time off to sleep, and you don't shift all the time. You just stick with one schedule and don't. And I was doing it, all over the place, and it was terrible. And then the last thing is stress sleep. And mind. Yeah.
So stress. So it's poor sleep, and then you're and then you were going to say, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You were saying stress.
I was just going to say mindset and stress are also huge. So it's right. They all play a role. I think.
I preach 5 things. It's diet. It's exercise, it's sleep. So you and I are spot on. Water and hydration. Not a lot of people pay attention to hydration, and there's and where's your quality and your quantity of water. And then, like I mentioned, is relationships. What's that relationship that you're having with your patients? Are you having a good relationship with yourself, where you're taking care of yourself? Are you paying attention to your sleep? And once those all kind of get together, they start to fall into place. And it's just amazing how you and I parallel a lot of these thought processes. And so I really, really respect what you're saying. The one thing I found really interesting is that the lies that I taught in medical school. So let's talk about that for a minute. If you were to reteach medical school, what would you be teaching? How would you approach your new pupils in the school?
Well, it's some of the things we touched on before, in that that it's all that metabolism plays an outsized role. In particular, an organelle of the body called the mitochondria that is fundamental in metabolism, that we were taught is just an energy cell. It's actually transformative, and there are people now working on mitochondrial transplantation as a treatment really? For chronic disease and even aging, and it's super exciting. So I think reframing these chronic diseases as having a metabolic underpinning that responds to lifestyle and the way we live, not so much the pills and surgery, because the pills and surgery in most of these diseases don't work. They may be, like I said, they may be life-saving in the short term, and I'm not telling anyone to stop taking any pills that their doctor recommends, but long term, in most cases, they don't change the progression of the disease.
You're not treating root cause.
Yeah, exactly. One other wake-up call I have, and I think it's a whole change in society and change the way medicine works, is that, hey, even though I'm a doctor, as a patient, I realize that doctors they don't really make me healthy, right? Doctors are too busy just making us less sick. In other words, doctors deal with sickness, and that's the way our health system is. And there's enough sickness to keep doctors busy forever. But the problem is, if I want to be healthy, a doctor's not going to do it for me. They may make me less sick, but if I want to be healthy, truly healthy, it's about me, and I get to make choices about my lifestyle. When I sleep, when I wake up, when I go to the gym, when I, all those things.
Now, I've experienced a lot of residents in my time, many residents, and the hazing that kind of goes on with these residents, fourth year versus third year versus second year and first year, and also not necessarily the attendings. The attendings are usually pretty mellow, but I find that I sometimes question if the hazing mentality in this residency program creates a sense of pride and the ability to defend your stance, and therefore not look outside another opinion, therefore to be humble and to say, hey, maybe we should be looking at the way we're being taught or the way we're addressing these particular issues differently. Maybe I do need to question this instead of saying, no, I don't want to be wrong. I don't want being yelled at for being wrong. This is my answer and I'm sticking to it, kind of case scenario. What are your thoughts around when we're developing doctors in the future, the way that doctors need to approach their patients, and are they willing to be able to even listen to their patients enough to get the information that they need to say, hey, I think I know what's going on with you because I listened to you long enough. And okay, so what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are built-in institutional biases in our medical schools and our whole medical system that go against these optimal treatments. I mean, first of all, medical education is paid for by the pharmaceutical business by and large. The research papers are funded by the pharmaceutical business in the majority, and my lab was funded by the pharmaceutical business. So there's kind of a bias that the work that gets done are drugs for treatment. It's much harder to fund a lifestyle program to do it. The disease,
it's hard to make money off of it, apparently.
I mean, fasting. But anyway, the diseases are also the payment system. The reimbursement is based on an on and off switch. When my hemoglobin A1C, which is a marker for diabetes and glucose damage, glycation damage of red blood cells, when it goes above a certain point, I have prediabetes, just like a third of the adolescents in America. Right. And then when it goes past another point, I have full-on type 2 diabetes. And then certain things happen. The doctor can see me and start charging for me as a diabetic patient. There's certain medicines that will be paid for, metformin, sulfonylureas, and eventually insulin. And that's the way the system works. There's no, in most situations, there's not a payment for the person who's on their way to diabetes and they're coming in there. But let me pull the blame back a little bit. The blame is not just on the medical system, and my heart of hearts, I believe that people are basically good. Nobody gets up wanting to harm someone else, but the incentives, conscious and unconscious, perverse, sometimes financial incentives, drive this whole thing. But some of it's on the patient too. Yeah. If I'm a doctor, right, I'm treating diabetes, let's say, and I know that I can treat diabetes, type 2 diabetes, with the drugs I mentioned, and they'll save the patient's life. If they have a hyperglycemic coma or something, the insulin is literally life-saving. So no question, you change the person's life. Now the person comes into my office and, oh, you've got diabetes. I'm so sorry. This is what it is. We have a discussion about it. Then the question becomes, what do you want for treatment? And, I can either offer them a pill, start them on metformin or something.
And that takes 5 minutes to do, right? It takes 5 minutes to write that prescription.
Exactly. Right. Or I can give them a long lecture about their lifestyle and, eating habits and different things like that. And, I know as a patient, I'm basically lazy. I would rather go into the doctor's office and have a pill for the disease or even a surgery. First of all, a pill doesn't require me to change my life at all, except for, a few seconds in the morning when I take it. surgery, even surgery, I get off work for maybe a week, have the surgery, and then I recover. But I don't change my lifestyle, which is literally who I am, right? And that's a big ask. I would much rather take a pill or surgery than change my lifestyle. If most patients feel that way. But the problem is they're not presented with the full story. For the diabetes patient, you'd say, I can give you these pills and surgery, but type 2 diabetes is a chronic progressive disease. What does that mean? That you will likely, that you'll go on to these things. What's the number one cause of surgical amputations in America? It's type 2 diabetes. What's the number one cause of renal failure and dialysis? It's type 2 diabetes. What's the number one cause of blindness, retinal blindness? It's type 2 diabetes. And it will significantly increase your risk for heart attack, stroke, cancer, even mental illness, and Alzheimer's disease, of course, is called type 3 diabetes, So, right. So I'll give you the pill, but it's basically, you still have those things to look forward to as you go down the line. Or I can have you stop carbohydrates, and diabetes largely is carbohydrate toxicity, as well as the other lifestyle things too.
I like that term, carbohydrate toxicity. That's nice.
I was just going to say, I think they need to rename type 2.
Yeah,
the two biggest lies that you talk about in the book are type 2 diabetes being treated by insulin, because your body's already saying, I've got plenty of insulin. I just totally resistant to it anymore because you're feeding me too many carbs. So,
and you don't have any muscles.
Right. And so type 2 diabetes is by far the biggest lie that I got out of your book. The second biggest, right behind it, is the big lie around cholesterol. And I experienced that as well. I had a high cholesterol. They stick you on statins, and within 2 months, I couldn't walk. I mean, I was in such pain, every bone of my body. And then, as you detail in the book, it's not even lowering the cholesterol that matters. The high density LDL. It's getting basically lowering a number they can measure in a way they can treat, as opposed to fixing the problem in the first place, which is, hey, you're eating too much carbs and too much high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah, and this is an area where there's tremendous discussion and controversy even to this day. Largely the cardiology community, believes that LDL cholesterol and its subtypes drive heart disease, and statins is one of the few interventions they can do that does anything for heart disease, other than lifestyle, which will reverse it. But the statins, as you say, many people have many complications from statins, which are minimized in the scientific literature. It's even associated with type 2 diabetes, increasing insulin resistance. And interestingly, if you're taking statins to reduce your risk of heart attack, it's interesting to note that most people who have a heart attack have a normal LDL cholesterol when they come in. And furthermore, the big meta studies of statins and risk for heart disease and heart attack and basically death, there's several large meta studies that came out, and it showed interesting something, that lowering your LDL cholesterol actually lowers your risk of death from heart disease. It's a small percentage, a percent or two. But wait a minute. Heart disease is the number one cause of death that you and I and most of our listeners are going to die from statistically. So I'll take a 1% risk, but it's complicated, because when those same studies looked at what's called all-cause mortality, in other words, death from all reasons, a really weird, disturbing thing happened. Is the people who were on statins actually had a little bit higher mortality rate from other things, so that their overall all-cause mortality wasn't different than the people who were on statins. Well, wait a minute, what does that mean? They have fewer heart attacks, so what gives? Well, they died of other things. What did they die of? Things like traffic accidents. They died of slips and falls, like mental issues that we know statins affect the brain also, and there may be some effects there. So it's very complicated, and it's challenging. But I push back a lot on statins on the book. An easy thing to do where you don't get into an argument with your cardiologist is, if you want to get a calcium score, which is a simple CT scan here, and if you have a 0 calcium score, even the most aggressive cardiologists, the recommendations of American College of Cardiology are that you don't need to be on statins. So
Right. And I have a lot of patients too that get a 0 score and the doctors want to put them on statins. I'm like, hey, I promise you, let's just relax on that. Another one of the controversial things, looks like the red light is off on that, but the where I see my patients who I put them on keto or carnivore diets and they lose weight and they're doing great and they're fantastic and they're back to exercising, because I teach, that the more muscle you have, the less insulin resistant you are. So let's go work out. Let's do resistance training. Let's do all those fundamental great things. Is that we do lipids and then their cholesterols come up and they're like, are we going in the right direction with this? And I'm saying, hold on, let's look at your HDL. Let's look at your triglycerides. The total cholesterol bumps up 20, 30 points. The LDL does the same, but yet their ratios still stay good or better or improved. And it's really teaching people about the ratios and understanding cholesterol from that standpoint too.
yeah, that's a great point. And for any disease, it's possible to calculate your risk, or what's called hazard ratios. And I talk about this in the book, is that elevated LDL cholesterol is a risk factor for heart disease. A very small percentage on there. What are the bigger risk factors? Like orders of magnitude more. Things like you mentioned, HDL cholesterol, triglycerides, which are markers of metabolic disease. Smoking is a much bigger risk factor. Diabetes is a much bigger risk factor. So all these metabolic things are much bigger risk factors than LDL cholesterol for heart disease and heart attack. Well, what does that mean? I mean, I was taught growing up, my mom was a dietitian, that, if I eat a piece of meat with fat on it, that's going to increase my risk for heart disease. But now we know that I'm more likely to increase my risk of heart disease from eating a jelly donut, which is full of sugar, carbohydrates, seed oils, and other things that drive insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction, than I am from meat, which is actually very healthy now. And people are coming around to that. People used to be afraid of eggs, and now
Right.
even the cardiologists acknowledge that dietary cholesterol has little or no impact on serum cholesterol. Whether serum cholesterol matters is a whole nother discussion, but at least dietary cholesterol, you can eat whatever you want, on all the shellfish, all the, eggs. And actually
Bacon
eggs
and
are
eggs.
eggs are one of the healthiest things you can eat. It's nature's Ozempic,
Yeah.
Nature's Ozempic.
Speaking of Ozempic, obviously that's always a hot topic. People coming to me and asking about Ozempic and what it does for these people and their insulin resistance. And, some people don't know this, but once you're done with Ozempic, your weight comes right back, and the protein wasting that can happen at the same time. But then you also have people that have truly metabolic dysfunction that you got to get them out of that window. Just much like you said, we can save your life by bringing these numbers in alignment, but then what are you going to do with that? So what's your conversation that you have with your patients around Ozempic?
Yeah, Ozempic's a great thing. GLP-1 agonists in general, which are including Ozempic, Mounjaro, and several other names like that. It's almost a litmus point for, excuse me, for doctors in the low carb space. Everybody agrees, oh yeah, no sugar, no carbs, maybe seed oils, get rid of those. But Ozempic or pills, they're going, no, that's from big pharma. That's just as bad. But I actually have a slightly different view on that. I totally agree, with what you're saying, Keith, that, if all you do is take Ozempic, you're going to lose muscle mass, and it's not going to be good, especially when you stop it. You'll lose the weight again. So, but I think Ozempic is different than, almost any other pharmaceutical, because it has interesting effects. It affects not only, gastric emptying and filling, kind of a mechanical effect on the GI tract, but what's even more interesting are the central effects. In other words, half the people who take Ozempic spontaneously cut back on their alcohol consumption. They also notice things like their addictions, whether it's shopping, porn, gambling, whatever it is, these addictions drop back. And it's something, it's still early on this, poorly understood. People feel it's something to do with the dopamine, reward circuits in the brain, and the GLP-1 slightly tweak these. So when you're on them, sure, the food noise, as they say, goes away. So you're not eating, but even people who eat it tend to eat healthier. It it's the sugar that doesn't appeal to them and the carbs, and they find themselves, hey, that salad looks pretty good, and and the other stuff doesn't.
Really?
But so there's all sorts of interesting things going on with it. Plus now we're seeing, GLP-1 started off as a type 2 diabetes drug, right? That was the prime indication. And then they figured out it's weight loss. Well, guess what? Now they figure out it's FDA approved for sleep apnea. Guess what's coming? Heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, all these other things are coming down the pipeline. I see GLP-1s as a guide to metabolic health, because people who are on it can transition into eating metabolically healthy. And to your point, Keith, a lot of people, sadly, I mean, I'm in LA, I know about Ozempic from here. A lot of people, they eat a lot of food, and it's largely junk food, and they're overweight, right? So they take Ozempic, don't do anything else. They just take Ozempic and they eat less, right? They lose weight, but all they do is they eat less junk food. So they're no longer fat, but they're still metabolically unhealthy, and that doesn't work. So the key thing you have to do with Ozempic or any of these GLP-1 agonists is, when you start losing weight or whatever you take them for, you need to update your protein. And you need to do strength training. It's going to the gym, I never set foot in the gym before 2 years ago, in a weight gym. Now I'm there every other day. It's the most important longevity hack. Anybody over 50 should be in the gym, men and women, and they should be lifting weights. Because
you
that builds muscles.
Sarcopenia at all costs, because that's
and so especially if you're on a GLP-1, you do those. But the idea is,
do you try to wean them eventually once they develop good habits and their BMI is appropriate?
GLP-1s, the idea is that you take them for life, right? Well, nobody wants to do that. So what people do is, if you shift your diet to a healthy lifestyle, and change your diet, your exercise, keep your protein up, go into the gym, then you can wean off it, and you're a different person. You're not eating the junk food, either large amounts or small amounts. You're eating healthy. You have a healthy lifestyle. You don't need Ozempic.
Well, because you've naturally done the things that you could have done in the first place. It's just that you needed that GLP-1 to kind of kickstart you into the right direction. But if you had gone to the gym right away and started eating, better, eat your high proteins, healthy fats, which at this point, as long as it's not a seed oil, I consider it a healthy fat anymore. But I mean, the whole idea is, if you're the kind of person that can't start until you see something or had an effect, maybe it's good for that. I'm still very skeptical. I think the side effects of GLP-1s, they just smell to me just like statins, that all of a sudden they're going to find out, there's all these other things it's doing too. I hadn't heard the addiction side effect of that. That's
almost
very interesting.
Like a Narcan kind of benefit.
So like a Narcan for your internals,
right?
And they've been around. To your point, George. Certainly, anything's possible. We always have to be careful. But GLP-1s in various forms have been around for now 20, 25 years in use. So we're getting a longer history of it, and for a while before I really became aware of them with lifestyle, it used to be just, hey, try harder, you're not doing it, try harder, and for some people that doesn't work, whatever their demons are, or their reward systems. And if GLP-1s help them make that transition to a healthier lifestyle, then they can discontinue it. Or some people do microdosing, very small doses. Once a week, maybe once a month even, and that's all they need, and many people can go off it entirely.
And in many of the podcasts we talk about, you got to get the motivation to go to the gym. You got to get the motivation to stop eating the carbs. And that's by far the biggest issue everybody talks to. Hey, I really don't want to go to the gym. I don't go to the gym. But But if GLP-1s can be used as a way to kickstart that, maybe they're useful.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of peptides that are coming out too that are claiming GLP-1 effects versus just the standard GLP-1 inhibitor that we see today. And I'm interested to see about what peptides are going to be doing for this space. There's a lot of supplements. A lot of these supplement companies are trying to come out and market some type of GLP-1 activities with the insanitol, if I'm saying that right, and the other type of glycemic resistant improvement drugs or supplements. As
we get to the end, there's a lot of stuff happening in the political area, and we try really hard to not get into politics, but it's hard. It's hard to not mention, hey, where did the USDA get this damn pyramid that's destroying everybody? Do you see much hope in what's happening there? Are there some good things happening? Do we have a reason to think that maybe we're going to have less corn subsidies and therefore less high fructose corn syrup? I mean, what kinds of things could we be pushing in the political arena for that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic, and like you, I'm not political. My brand is not political. I love my Republican friends and I love my Democrat friends. I just wish they could work together more.
Yeah, right.
But one thing is just eye-opening to me is the first time in my memory I'm now hearing and seeing on a national stage, politicians from whatever party, but talking about metabolic health, seed oils. They even mentioned mitochondrial transplantation. So it's in the public
They're talking
awareness
about it at least
now. Yeah. And hopefully it's not going to be a, Maha Republican issue, and it's not going to be a Democrat issue either. It should be something that we all get behind. And yeah, the stuff you mentioned, junk food subsidies. Junk food's cheap because they're subsidized. Get rid of advertisements for prescription drugs. It's only one other country in the world, New Zealand, that allows it because it's so corrupting to the media. The media is paid for by pharmaceuticals, so they never say anything bad about pharmaceuticals.
So your advertising's paid for by pharma. The test results are paid for by pharma, and oh golly, they're getting rich. I mean, what a surprise!
Yeah, I mean, even the Ozempic, all very good points. Yeah,
even though Ozempic costs $16,000 in the U.S., I can go to Canada or I can go to England and get it for $100. And it's literally the same drug. So
I'm really interested in seeing. I'm really interested in seeing what the political space is going to do with our children, because that's where our future is with our children. What we're doing in the schools, what we're teaching them, what we're promoting them, what we're giving to them during sports activities and other collaborative events. And if we can get their hearts and minds changed to eat right and to exercise and do the right thing, then we're really going to be onto something, because we have a disease right here. We have our kids are looking at phones and video games and sitting down even more instead of out there playing and riding on bikes like we used to do. So we do have another epidemic coming, and that's with the sit-down culture that we're currently in. And that's why we have metabolic disease now, is because most of our jobs are sit-down. You don't see metabolic diseases in construction workers. And so my hope is that we can really flip the script in education when it comes to kids, so we can get them understanding the importance of exercise and proper diet.
Well, thank you so much for taking your time to speak with us. Maybe we can do it again as we get deeper into what's going on with all this. I encourage people to go get the book. There's on our website, we have many of the new ones that are coming out, but this one, like I said, is the one that kickstarted the journey. Any last words of advice or?
Well, just people always ask me, gosh, you wrote this book, aren't you depressed because, and actually, no, I'm excited. I'm hopeful. I think the future is bright. The idea that, lifestyle is a choice that each one of us gets to make for ourselves. Every morning we wake up, it's a new day. We can decide when we exercise, when we go to the gym, what we eat. And it's a new, we're all empowered. We all get to be the CEO of our own health. And I think it's going to change the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate your energy. Very, very good. Thank you for changing the lives of your patients and the people that are listening to you. I'm sure that, it's countless people that you're improving their quality of life just by being present and speaking the truth. And just know that that's going to go down in good karma history for you. So thank you very much for all your work.
Great. Thanks, George. Thanks, Keith. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this RestoreWellness.org podcast. If you would like to learn more about Dr. Lufkin and his book, you can go to his webpage, www.robertlufkinmd.com. We also encourage you to get his latest insights and comments on X at Robert Lufkin MD. You can learn more about Restore Wellness on the web at restorewellness.org and on X at restorewellorg. Thank you for listening, and best of luck in your personal quest for wellness.